The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of the bridal suite, casting a golden glow on what should have been the happiest day of their lives. Mark adjusted the cufflinks his bride, Emma, had gifted him, feeling the weight of the moment. In just a few hours, they would stand before their loved ones and exchange vows. But something gnawed at him, an inexplicable unease that pulled him from his groomsmen's jokes and whiskey toasts. He decided to check on Emma, not because he doubted her, but because he wanted to steal one quiet moment amidst the chaos. The hotel staff nodded politely as he made his way to her room. His heart raced with anticipation. He thought of her smile. The way her laugh seemed to light up every corner of his world. But when he reached the suite, the door was slightly ajar. He hesitated, unsure whether to knock or simply call her name. Before he could decide, a sound stopped him cold. Laughter, Emma's unmistakable melodic laugh, mixed with a deeper, masculine chuckle. Mark pushed the door open just enough to peer inside. What he saw froze him in place. Emma, still in her silk robe, sat on the edge of the bed, her hand resting intimately on the arm of his best friend, Jason. They were locked in a moment that required no words to explain. The room smelled of champagne and perfume, the remnants of a night that should never have happened. Emma looked up, her eyes meeting Mark's. Shock and guilt washed over her face, but Jason didn't even flinch. "Mark," Emma started, standing up as if to explain, but words seemed to fail her. Mark didn't wait to hear excuses. His heart shattered as he turned and walked away, his mind spinning with disbelief. The ceremony, the guests, the future he had envisioned, all of it crumbled into a pile of ash. Hours later, as guests whispered and waited in the chapel, Mark stood alone in his room, staring at the tuxedo that suddenly felt like a cruel joke. He didn't cancel the wedding. He didn't confront Emma or Jason again. Instead, he made a quiet decision to let the day and his relationship end with as much dignity as he could muster. Emma never showed up at the altar, and Mark never explained why. The whispers turned into rumors, but Mark remained silent, knowing that some betrayals are best left behind, unspoken and unresolved. As he walked away from the chapel, he vowed never to let someone else's betrayal define him again. And while the day ended in heartbreak, it also marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where Mark would rebuild his life on his own terms. The days that followed were a blur for Mark. Friends and family reached out, their voices filled with concern and curiosity, but he offered little more than vague reassurances. He buried himself in work, gym routines, and anything that kept his mind occupied. Yet, no matter how busy he stayed, the image of Emma and Jason haunted him. Months passed, and the wedding became the talk of their social circle. Speculation swirled. Some guessed cold feet, others hinted at infidelity. Mark avoided social gatherings, deleting messages from those who sought gossip rather than comfort. One evening, as Mark scrolled through his emails, a familiar name popped up. It was from Emma. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" Against his better judgment, he opened it. "Mark, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I owe you an explanation. What you saw wasn't something I planned, and it wasn't something I'm proud of. Jason and it wasn't love, Mark. It was a mistake, a stupid, drunken mistake the night before our wedding. I panicked, and I let everything spiral out of control. Please, if you can find it in your heart, let's meet. I want to apologize face to face." Mark stared at the screen, his emotions warring within him. Anger told him to ignore her. Curiosity urged him to see her one last time. Against all odds, the latter one. They met at a quiet cafe far from the places they used to frequent. Emma looked different, her confident demeanor replaced by one of shame and nervousness. She fidgeted with her coffee cup, avoiding his gaze. "Thank you for coming," she began. "I didn't think you would." "I almost didn't," Mark admitted, his voice calm but distant. Emma took a deep breath. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I need you to know that what happened with Jason wasn't something I ever wanted. I don't even know how it started. It was a moment of weakness, and it destroyed everything. Mark listened, his face unreadable. He had rehearsed a dozen things to say, but now that she was here, they all felt hollow. "Why tell me this now?" he finally asked. "Because you deserve closure," she said. "You didn't get the answers you needed that day. I don't expect you to understand or forgive me, but I couldn't live with myself without at least trying to set things right." Mark leaned back in his chair, considering her words. "You're right. I don't understand, and I don't think I ever will. But I've moved on, Emma. Or at least, I'm trying to." Emma nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm glad you are. I hope you find someone who treats you the way you deserve." With that, their conversation ended. Mark walked away, leaving Emma behind in the cafe. This time, there were no lingering questions, no unresolved emotions. Years later, Mark found himself standing on another altar, holding the hand of a woman who had shown him what real love and loyalty looked like. As he spoke his vows, he realized that the pain of his past had shaped him, but it no longer defined him. Emma and Jason had become a distant memory, a lesson in resilience and self-worth. And as Mark kissed his new bride, he felt a peace he hadn't known in years. Some endings, he realized, are just the beginnings of better things to come. As Mark settled into his new life, sheer curtains of the scars of his past began casting to fade. A golden glow his on new what should have been the happiest day of their lives. Everything he had ever hoped Mark for. Adjusted the cufflinks kind, his bride, supportive, Emma, and unwavering in her love. Feeling the weight of his history with Emma, in just a few hours, they rarely discussed it. They would stand. It wasn't out of avoidance, but because their present was so full of joy that the past seemed irrelevant. An inexplicable unease that pulled him from his years into their marriage. And Mark received a surprise. He decided to check on Emma. It was a reunion, not because he doubted her, college friend, but because he wanted to steal one the same circle that had once included Jason and Emma. The hotel staff nodded politely. Mark as he made his way to her room. Why would he want to see the people who had been silent bystanders? He thought of her smile. But Sarah laughed seemed to light up. "You've grown so much since then," she said. But when he reached the suite, "If you feel up to it, go." The door was slightly not ajar. For them. He hesitated, for yourself, unsure whether them who you become, or simply call reluctantly. Her name. Before he could decide, the reunion was held at a lakeside lodge. Laughter, a nostalgic unmistakable melodic laugh. As he arrived with Sarah, masculine chuckle, he felt a pang of anxiety. Mark pushed the door open, but it just quickly dissipated when familiar faces greeted him, froze him in place. The evening was a mix of laughter, still and reminiscing, and catching up. Sat on the edge of the realized that many of his old friends had no idea what had truly happened on his wedding day. They were locked in a moment that required no words to explain, and none pressed him for details. The room smelled of champagne and perfume. As Mark stepped outside for fresh air that should never have happened, he spotted a figure sitting by the dock. It was Jason meeting Mark. Jason looked up as Mark guilt washed over her face. His expression, but Jason a mixture of surprise and guilt. "Mark," Emma started, standing opposite to explain. "Jason," but words seemed to fail her. His tone neutral. Mark didn't wait for a moment. Excuses. They stood in silence. His heart shattered as he turned and gentle lapping of the water. His mind spinning with sound between them. The ceremony, Jason spoke. The guests. "I've wanted to talk to you for a long time. All of it, but I didn't think you'd ever want to hear from me." Hours you were later, right about that, as guests whispered Mark said and waited bluntly. In the chapel. Jason sighed. Mark stood alone in his room. "I don't expect forgiveness." Staring at the tuxedo what I did to you was unforgivable. Like a cruel joke. I ruined something beautiful between you and Emma. He didn't confront because Emma I was selfish and stupid. Instead, not a day goes he made a quiet decision to let the day and Mark his relationship looked at him. And with as much dignity but unreadable as he could muster. Regret Emma never showed up at the altar, what happened, Jason, and Mark never explained why. But it doesn't matter anymore. The whispers turned into rumors. My life Mark remained silent. Better than knowing I ever that some betrayals are best left behind, and I don't have room for anger and grudges. As Jason he walked nodded, away from the chapel, his shoulders slumping, he vowed never to let someone else's betrayal define him again. You deserve it. And while the day ended, Mark didn't respond. It also marked the beginning of a new chapter. Back to the lodge, where Sarah was waiting to rebuild his life on his own terms. She greeted him with a warm smile. The days that followed, and as they danced together under the string lights, friends and family reached out. The final weight of the past, their voices filled with concern and curiosity. Emma and Jason were no longer a part of the story. More than vague reassurances. They were footnotes in a life filled with love, buried himself in work, resilience, gym routines, and anything that kept his mind occupied. And for the first time in years, Yet, Mark felt no matter how busy he stayed, the reunion weekend came to an Jason haunted him, leaving Mark with a sense of closure, and the wedding became the talk of their social circle. On the drive speculation swirled. Sarah noticed his thoughtful expression, cold feet, and reached others hinted at squeeze his hand. Mark avoided social gatherings. She asked her deleting messages from those better than okay, gossip, rather than comfort, glancing at her with a smile. As Mark scrolled through his emails, but I think a familiar name popped up. To face it all again, Emma, and realize how far I've come. Can we talk? Sarah smiled. Against his better judgment, you're stronger than you give yourself credit for. Mark, you know. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. Guess I had a good reason to be. I owe you an explanation. The days turned into weeks. You saw wasn't something I planned, life returned to its steady rhythm. And it wasn't something I'm proud of. But something about the Jason and I sparked an idea. It wasn't love, Mark. He began journaling, a stupid, first about the drunken mistake the night then about the lessons he'd learned from heartbreak, panicked and healing, and I let everything spiral out of control. The more he realized he had a story. If you can find it in your heart, do you think people would want to read this? I want to apologize face to one evening. Mark stared at the screen. I don't just think they warring within him, she said with anger conviction. Told him to ignore. I know they would. Curiosity, your story isn't just about betrayal. One last time. It's about resilience and finding love again. They met at a quiet cafe far from the places encouraged by her support. Emma Mark turned his journal, her confident demeanor replaced by he wrote about the moments that defined him. She fidgeted with her coffee cup, Emma with Jason, avoiding his gaze. The pain of walking away from the wedding. She began a slow but rewarding journey to rediscover himself. I almost didn't. He wrote about meeting Sarah and the love that had shown him what Emma took a deep breath. Looked like. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. He submitted his manuscript to a publisher. I need you to know that what happened with Jason they loved wasn't something I ever wanted. Titled Standing I don't even know how it started. A journey through it was a moment of weakness. Hit shelves the following everything and quickly became a bestseller. His readers resonated with Mark's honesty. He had rehearsed a dozen things to say, and he received countless letters from people sharing their own stories of resilience. Why tell me this now? One day, he finally asked, signing copies of his book because you deserve closure. Mark noticed a familiar face. You didn't get the answers you needed that day. Emma. I don't expect you to understand or forgive me, holding a copy of his book. But I couldn't live with myself. Hi, Mark. Without at least trying to set things right. Her voice Mark leaned back in his chair. Emma, he replied, considering her words, his tone polite but guarded. I don't understand. The book on the table for him, and I don't think I ever will. I read it, but I've moved on, Emma. Her eyes glistening with emotion. I'm trying to. It's beautiful. Emma nodded. I'm so glad you found your happiness. I'm Mark glad nodded, his heart steady. I hope you find someone who treats you the way you deserve. I hope you found peace too. Their conversation ended. Bittersweet Mark walked away, leaving Emma behind in the cafe. With that, she walked away. There were no lingering questions, sense of closure, unresolved emotions. She was a part of his story. Years later, yes, Mark no longer held any power on another altar. As he returned to signing a woman who had shown him what Sarah real love and loyalty looked like, holding two as he spoke his vows, she handed one to him that the pain of his past had shaped him. Busy day, no longer defined him. Emma and Jason had become a distant memory. Replied, a lesson in resilience and self-worth as they stood together. And as Mark kissed surrounded by the buzz of the crowd, he felt a peace he hadn't realized that the life he had built. Some endings, the love he shared with Sarah, are just the beginnings of better things to come. The strength he had discovered was more than he had ever dreamed of. His past had shaped him, but it didn't define him, and that, he knew, was the greatest victory of all. As Mark and Sarah drove home from the book's signing, the quiet hum of the car filled the space between them. Sarah glanced at him with pride in her eyes. You know, she said, breaking the silence, I think your book is just the beginning. You've connected with so many people who needed to hear your story. What if there's more you can do? Mark raised an eyebrow. More? Like what? Sarah shrugged. A podcast, maybe? Or speaking events. You've shown people they're not alone. Imagine the impact you could have if you talked to them directly. The idea stuck with Mark. Over the following weeks, he began exploring ways to expand his message. With Sarah's help, he launched a podcast called Resilient Hearts, where he invited guests to share their stories of overcoming heartbreak, betrayal, and loss. The podcast quickly gained a following, and Mark found himself deeply moved by the stories of his listeners. One particular episode stood out. A young woman named Claire called in to share how she had discovered her fiancé cheating just days before their wedding. Hearing her voice tremble as she recounted her pain reminded Mark of his own journey. Claire, he said gently, I know it feels like the end of the world right now. I've been where you are, and I can promise you this. There is life beyond this pain. It's not easy, but you're stronger than you realize. After the episode aired, Claire sent Mark a heartfelt email, thanking him for giving her hope. It was moments like these that fueled his passion. As Resilient Hearts grew, Mark began receiving invitations to speak at conferences and events. One day, he was invited to deliver the keynote address at a Relationship Resilience Summit. Standing on stage before hundreds of people, he shared his journey, raw and unfiltered, and ended with a message of hope. No matter how much pain you've endured, he said, his voice steady, you have the power to rebuild. Heartbreak doesn't define you. What you choose to do afterward does. The audience rose to their feet in applause, and Mark felt a wave of gratitude. Not for the applause, but for the path he had taken, the pain he had endured and the growth it had sparked. Backstage, Sarah met him with a hug. You were incredible, she said, her eyes shining with pride. I couldn't have done any of this without you, Mark replied. Years later, Mark would look back on his journey with awe. What had started as a moment of heartbreak had transformed into a mission to inspire others. His past was no longer a source of pain, but a testament to the strength that lies within us all. And as he sat in his home office one evening, writing the final chapter of his second book, Sarah walked in with a cup of tea and their young daughter toddling beside her. Daddy, are you writing again? The little girl asked, her wide eyes full of curiosity. I am... Sweetheart, Mark said, lifting her onto his lap. I'm writing about how strong people can be, no matter what happens to them. The little girl beamed. Like you and Mommy? Exactly, Mark said, smiling as Sarah leaned against the doorway, watching them. Mark knew that while the past had shaped him, it was his present and the love he had built with Sarah that defined his future. As Mark closed his laptop for the night, his daughter dozed off in his lap. Sarah walked over, gently lifting the little girl and carrying her to bed. Mark followed, watching as Sarah tucked their daughter in, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She's got your determination, Sarah whispered, smiling at Mark as they stepped quietly out of the room. Let's hope she doesn't need it the way I did, Mark replied, wrapping an arm around Sarah. Later that evening, as they sat together on the couch, Sarah rested her head on Mark's shoulder. Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if things hadn't fallen apart with Emma? Mark considered the question for a moment. Sometimes, he admitted, but not in a way that makes me regret anything. If it hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here with you. I wouldn't have her. Sarah smiled. It's funny, isn't it? How the worst moments can lead to the best ones. Mark nodded, his heart full. It's like the pain was clearing the way for something better. Something I couldn't see at the time. As the years went on, Mark continued to grow his platform, reaching thousands of people through his books, podcasts, and public speaking. He became a symbol of resilience, showing others that heartbreak wasn't the end of the road, but a detour to something greater. One day, he received a message that caught him off guard. It was from Jason. The message was short. Mark, I saw your latest book in a store today. I picked it up and I couldn't put it down. I don't know if I have the right to say this, but I'm proud of the person you've become. You've done something amazing with your life. I'll never stop regretting what I did to you, but I hope you know that your story has inspired me to be better. Thank you for that. Mark read the message twice before setting his phone down. He didn't reply, not out of anger, but because he didn't feel the need. The chapter with Jason had long since closed, and Mark had no desire to reopen it. Instead, he focused on the life he had built, the life that mattered. Years later, as Mark sat at the head of a table surrounded by his family, Sarah, their 3 children, and even a grandchild on the way, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The pain, the betrayal, the rebuilding, it had all led to this. And as he raised a glass to toast the family he had created, Mark realized that his greatest victory wasn't just surviving heartbreak. It was thriving beyond it, surrounded by love, laughter, and a future brighter than he could have ever imagined.